Have you ever wanted to command battles on a fully modular Osgiliath board that's different every single time that you play it, crafted to capture the ruins of Gondor's ancient capital? Well, today I'm showing you how I built mine so that you can build your own. From creating realistic looking stonework to setting up the modular sections for endless combinations, you'll learn every step to make this stunning battlefield your own. In this full tutorial, I'll walk through everything from the ground up. Literally. Whether you're gearing up for a Lord of the Rings campaign or just want to build epic terrain, this board is perfect for adding flexibility and character to your table. And to make this build even easier, I've designed detailed schematics to guide you along the way. You can purchase these directly or they're available for free to top tier patrons on my Patreon. Osgiliath has always been one of my favourite Middle-earth locations, and I couldn't resist bringing it to life because I've done Rohan, I've done Harad, and Osgiliath had to be brought to life in a modular way. And with these modular pieces, we'll capture both the grandeur and decay of Gondor's ancient city. So stick around to see each step from the first cuts to the finishing touches and learn techniques that you can apply to all your terrain builds. Let's dive in and bring this legendary city to your tabletop. This board is about 18 months in the making, from first having the idea to having the completed board. Now, the planning was interesting because it started as pieces of cardboard and a bed as I was recovering from back surgery, and then it evolved into one type of foam and then into the black foam you're seeing in front of you. And this is the video that you can watch all of if you are minded to, but it's quite simple how this is modular. We have different tiles which are twice as long as they are wide, which means that they can go into all sorts of different setups. On top of that, we have 10mm foam covering each tile, which has 100mm by 100mm footprints cut out of it, which means that buildings, which you can see how to make in other videos, can be slotted into this so that they can be held securely and look fantastic as if they were on a high quality gaming mat. The same applies with the higher sections. One is 30mm high and one is 50mm high, and they are two halves which can be placed at the side of the board or they can be together as a more central thing. Now at this stage of the planning that you're seeing right now, I hadn't even considered how I was going to do the river, but that came up later on. But let's get into how we actually make all of this. So this starts with some 20mm thick XPS foam. I'll put a link in the description as to where I get mine from. And what's going to need to happen is that this is going to need to be cut into 4 strips. Now to cut this, pretty simple going. So we're going to just measure accurately from the edge, steel rule, to 30. Going to do the same down here. So we've got a nice sharp blade, something long and straight. Now to begin with, you want to just very gently just mark out your line, and then you can build up the depth. And once it's marked pretty well, you can move on to using just the steel rule again. One down and 7 to go. That is our 8 baseboards done. So next up we need some 10mm XPS foam. We're going to cut one of these into 4. So exactly the same thing we're going to do here. There we go. One done. And that's the first stage of the project where I'm actually having to make a proper grown-up decision on it. So this is the 30mm thick foam, which is going to form one of the higher sections of the board, or two of the boards are going to have this higher section on it, so it's about deciding how big this should be. So it's going to be octagonal in shape, the whole section being 60 across, I think 4 centimetres off each one, so 4 off the width and 8 off the length. So that's 26 again, I put a mark there. This one to mark out the size of the next one. So the width has been cut. I just need to cut the length. Now I could again do this with a knife, but I've got a hot wire cutter, so why not use it, because it's perfect for this. Bingo. So now we've got our 50mm foam. Now this is going to be tricky but not impossible. So 26 is there. Here. Now you can, and I have, cut through this board before with a sharp knife. You end up having to get the blade right the way out, and it ends up not having the straightest cut. So I'm going to do it a different way. Now this is destined to go completely wrong. I'll be honest, that could have gone a hell of a lot worse. 8 centimetres off. And that is the highest section of the board done. So in terms of the basic stuff, pretty much done. So next up, we're going to decide the footprint of the building, potential building layouts and scatter terrain layouts. So I decided there's going to be a large footprint and a small footprint. So the small one is going to be 10 centimetres square, which is about that big, and the other one is going to be 20 by 10. And the reason for that is that I thought it would be quite nice if we could have the 10 by 10 bits of terrain fit into the 20 by 10 bit, just so there's even more variety. So I've been playing around with this, so I think that having something, so for this one, they're all at kind of 45 degrees, something like that, and then another one over there like that. So you've got the stuff all at an angle. Now, it's really going to be important that these things are cut accurately, so because we want to be able to move them between things nice and easily. So I've got a set square here, and this creates a perfect 45-degree angle in a position where there's space at the sides in case it's up against the edge of the board, so a bit further than that. I reckon round about there. So I'll make a mark on that angle there like that. And that's going to be 20 by 10, so that will take it all the way up to here. So down there like that. I'm going to switch hands to the other side and go up to there like that. Get our set square again, line that up there like that. Extend that to the 10, and then same on this corner here. Extend that to 20, and then the hope is that when I measure this distance here, it's going to be exactly 10, which, you know what, it actually is. To the mil, that is 10 centimetres, so that's pleasing. Right, it's only 10 mil foam, so it shouldn't be too difficult just to draw these lines without completely messing everything up. So these bits here I'm going to be keeping, because essentially what we're going to do is make buildings or make bits of scattered terrain and just be able to slot them in like that. That's the plan. So that one went well. On to the next one. So we want to make sure again that this is, we want these all to look like nicely parallel and stuff. So and we want it to be a sensible distance away. So base sizes in Middle-earth strategy graphic game are 25 mil. So we want to make sure there's room for 2 of them, I reckon. So 50 mil and then a little bit. About there would be good. And use our little template thing to work out. I think it's going to be about there. Up to 10 mil. Then I'm going to do the same thing with a set square, but rather than 20 by 10, it's going to be 10 by 10 square like that. So that's that one done, and the next one we are going to put here, which is a nice easy one to do. So go from there Yeah, well, I'll go for 54mm again. I don't know why it's 54, but it is. And we can just start doing our line there like that. And that's going to start from there. And although it's tempting to do the line on from there, I'm actually going to be sensible about this and work from one line rather than try to get two lines to match up. So once again, you don't need to see me cut out another square, but what's going to happen from here is so that one's going to go up to there, and have we got space to have another one in the same way? We just about do. So yeah, I'm going to cut out this one, and then I'm going to cut out another one for there, and I think that'll be a nice footprint for the buildings to sit in. So that is what all four cut out end up looking like. And what I have decided would be a good thing, let's say these two boards are next to each other, I don't want exactly the same thing. So it's going to be a flipped over template, but I'm going to move it right across to the edge. What I'm going to do is just take a pencil here, and I'm going to put a dot at each corner. So rather than having to do all of that work with a set square again, I can know that these are the right distance apart. Obviously I'm still going to measure it, but it's going to save me a whole bunch of time. So that's going to give us our layout for the next one, so I'm going to get on with cutting all of that out. So as is my wont, I decided to not do an exact mirror image of this. So I started with that one, and then I didn't carry on with it. And then I decided that it would be cool if we could have an L-shaped building as well, or L-shaped building footprint. So I'm going to cut out this here. Now we have an L-shaped footprint. So we have a couple of bits where it's all at an angle, and I thought that it would be a nice contrast if the next one I made, or the next two I made, had them were perpendicular. In the centre of this one here, there is going to be a 20 by 20. Essentially, there's going to be a 20 by 10 in the middle at each of these edges, which is just going to be a case of measuring in or measuring from the centre outwards, and then chucking a few other buildings in which I'll cut out. So I don't think you particularly need to see me cutting these out again. You've got the idea of it now, so I'm just going to get on with it. So next time you see it, these will be cut out. So these would be the lower parts, and these are the cutouts that we've done. So this is the central one I was just talking about, but equally this could be rotated, and these could be right at the edge of the board with a building there. So if you can begin to imagine what it would be like with buildings there, so there'd be alleyways and stuff, and some of these would just be flat, some of them would be massive puddles where the ground's going to fall into pieces and stuff. So yeah, I'm quite excited about how this is going to look. Now I'm going to show you the next stage of the process, which involves turning something which looks like this into something that looks like that. It's a bit of work. I think it's absolutely worthwhile, and when it's completely finished, I think it's going to look absolutely amazing. There is a 2 centimetre or 20mm trim of blocks, and all of these are roughly 20mm square. So what I've done is I've marked out 20mm from each edge here. So what I'm going to do is just draw lines to join those up, and it's nice to be fairly accurate with this, but you don't have to be absolutely and completely perfect about the whole thing. So the way that I'm doing this is, once I've drawn the lines on, I'm lining up my ruler, so I've got a 14 there. So every 2 centimetres I'm going to draw a line, so draw at 12, for 1 at 10, 8, 6, 4, and then 2, like that. Same here. So that's the first stage of it, and then what I'm doing is I'm essentially just drawing around it. All I'm using this is a biro, and then I'm kind of keeping the biro at an angle, and that kind of rounds off the edges of the. Don't want these to be completely perfect and uniform. We do want them to be angular slightly. So a bit of pressure, and this is literally just drawing around it, kind of cutting up the corners as I go. Next stage is to do that on the outside of these other 3 building footprints. So next up, we're going to do the edge, which is done in a very similar way, but rather than a 20mm thing, it's a 10mm thing. So I've taken the liberty of doing some markings already. So we're going to line this up on here. I'm going to draw our line. I'm not going to let our ruler go all over the place. Exactly the same as before, but with a 10mm thing. Just line your ruler up and just align at every 10mm. And then exactly the same thing, just to finish it off, is just to draw around them. Next time you see this, the other borders will be done as well. Okay, border's done, and the final step is to do our cobblestones. So there's 2 ways of doing this. I'm going to be using both. So I do have a 10cm cobblestone roller, which is going to help speed things up a lot. So let me show you how I am doing this. I want the cobblestones to look like they're all kind of flowing in the same direction. So I'm putting this at the widest point I can. So that's going to be from about here. Lining this up with this edge, and then pushing down hard and just rolling it out like so. So you can get into these corners here to a degree. So let's say we're going to start here, push nice and hard on it. Now once we get to about here, we start putting more pressure on this end, and more until we're basically just on the edge of it. And that means that we get right into that corner. This bit here hasn't been done as much. And the bits that you don't get to, we can just grab our biro out and we can just start randomly drawing rectangular, circular, whatever shapes. I just try not to think about it too much and just kind of almost like doodle. Now it's going to be impossible to match up the exact same pressure, so you're going to have different depths of cobblestones, but I feel like that would be the case with real life cobblestones anyway. So the smaller sections, you can get away with just doing that on it, but yeah, that's basically it. Roll the big areas that you can and draw in the ones that you can't. Then we've got 2 boards done. And the real hope with this is that the line where they join is going to not be invisible, obviously, but it's going to be pretty hard to see. Next up, we're going to take a ball of aluminium foil, and to give this a more of a stony texture, we're going to roll it across the whole board. Next up, we are going to do this for this. So that the idea with this is that we can have these filled in with buildings and scattered terrain and whatever you like really, but you also can leave them out and have these bits can be will be flooded. They'll have bits of rubble, and there'll be like a little dirty resin pour in there as well for both options. Now to do this, we need 2 things. We need a pen and we need a rolling pin, or it doesn't have to be a rolling pin. A hammer will be fine as well. So first we want to line up this with the edges and hold that pretty firmly in place. And we're going to draw. From here you've got a couple of choices. Now for these ones here, they're not very big, so trying to make it into a big hollow thing is a bit pointless. So literally just something heavy. And you'll see that the foam compresses a lot, it cracks, it breaks, and then once you put this back over, you see we've got this new texture to be working with, and that can be filled in further with what I said, sand, stones, block, whatever. Now the other option with this, and probably something that I'd recommend for the larger ones, is to try and cut something out of it. So this one I'm going to try and make kind of slope down from that way and that way, so that means cutting out a whole bunch of this, which isn't the quickest or easiest thing to do, to be perfectly honest. So what you can do is cut it out like I just, I'm going to come at an angle and all these different things. The alternative is to kind of half cheat on this, and that's what we're going to do with this one. And so what I'm going to do is going to cut a square out of this. With that done, I am going to run that through the hot wire cutter and make it about 1/4 of its current. Okay, so that is done, and we can put that back in there in a bit. Before that though, I want to cut into these some. So I'm going to use my handheld hot wire cutter for this, I think. The idea here is just trying to create an angle on this. This needing to be glued back in again. So there you go, something like that, and that join is going to get covered up once we put flock and stuff in. So, and as a finishing touch, we can take our aluminium ball here and we can just roll it on all of it, just to add a bit of texture to that. If you want to do these with a knife, then it's just you cut in at an angle, not going in too deep. Work your way around and then go across diagonally. Something like that. Using our trusty steel ruler. That creates that kind of crater thing, so that's your other option. Both are good. So in terms of the very basics of the board construction, that is half of the board done. Try and ignore the mess. We've got our base piece, we've got our bit for the top. We need to attach them together. I don't think there's any reason why not to right now. So I'm going to be using instant nails, put a link for that in the description. This is pretty cheap stuff and gives a really solid adhesion between the two. I'm going to do it slightly differently to how I may have done it in previous videos. Normally I'm just going to slap it on and that's it. But it's, I feel like it's kind of important there's a good bond throughout the whole thing. So what I'm going to do is this. Chuck it down in a few places and then I'm going to use this spare bit of wood to smear it out a bit. Okay, just got that on, spread out pretty nicely. So I'm going to line up, and this is practically to the mill, the right size. Instant nails gives you a good amount of working time. what's going to happen, what I'm going to do the rest of these, and I'm going to stack them up on top of each other. So what you won't see on camera is my favourite trick of just putting one of my kitchen stools on top. I'll probably put two on actually. It's as simple as that. So our things are all glued, these are nice and solid, and it's time to give them a base coat, which I'm going to do just with cheap white paint. So this is going to take a while with all of them, but makeup brush here, and just kind of go over the entire thing. Take a while. Most of the white will be lost, and maybe that get multiple coats of white on. I am going to go for like a greyish colour for the floor, so essentially it's a case of doing one coat and then seeing what it looks like. So I've changed up to a standard paintbrush. Accuracy is not the key here, it's just getting it on. So this is the board having had its base coat, but we don't want it to look like that when it's finished. What we want it to look like, what I want it to look like, is something a lot more like that. And that starts by putting pretty bright colours on, like these ones here. So that's what I'm going to do now. It's going to take a while, but I've got 4 different colours. I might choose some other ones here. So I've got a blue, I've got this which is bronze flesh tone, I've got a bone white, and I've got a leather brown. And essentially what's going to happen is, sort of leather brown here, is that I'm going to just pick out random stones and just paint them. Really going to not try to think about exactly why I'm painting each one I'm painting, I'm just randomly putting some paint down. Yeah, I am going to get on with doing that with all of these different colours, but yeah, it's nothing more complicated than just picking out stones. And you don't even have to do it neatly. It has to be, you don't want to go all over the place, but essentially it's just roughly painting a stone. The only issue is that I've got to do all of this on this one and 7 other tiles. Apparently I don't like myself very much. But it's going to look flippin' awesome. This took 25 minutes and put some music on and just painted it. One thing that I do is that when I change between each colour, I'm not even washing the brush off. Some of the stones get painted a kind of a new kind of random colour, just some extra variety. Now it's time to dry brush over the whole thing. So got some white paint here, got my big brush. When you're dry brushing, you can get the paint off and all sorts of things. I find it's actually really good to get the excess off on a spare bit of foam that you might have laying around. You see straight away it starts to kind of just bring those colours down from the bright ones that they were to what they are going to be. It's also going to start bringing up these stones here and get them looking a lot more stone-like. Also can do the middle of these if you're worried there's a bit too much excess. You can do a bit in here first. Okay. So I've tried to get a fairly even covering, so it's fairly consistent, but I'm going to darken this down with a wash before dry brushing it again. So I've made a black wash using, well, it's a kind of dark grey wash using paint and water and fairy liquid. I don't know what the mixture should be, but it should end up being the consistency of milk. So if they put it on the side, it's not running like water would. It's actually apply this and hopefully not ruin the whole thing. Okay, we'll leave that to dry. Okay, final thing on these stones is to do a final dry brush. I'm just going to dry brush the whole thing. So it's going to look. Now, it wouldn't be Osgiliath unless it was completely ruined, so let's completely ruin it now. Let's make some rubble. So what I found to be the quickest way for me to cut the rubble up is to use my hot wire cutter to do long strips, and then put those long strips together, and then cut them into small pieces with a knife. Just doing the long strips with the knife is not quick. So anyway, I've ended up with just random size pieces. Next I'm taking some greystone flock. Yeah, I'm going to tip a lot of this in. If you were making something that was like grey like that, then that might be okay for flock, but that's not. So this is the paint that I've mixed up as my base coat, and essentially I'm going to dye, or paint as it's normally known, I'm going to paint all of this colour by just mixing it all in together. So what happens is this will end up kind of clumping together as the paint kind of sticks it together, and then you just continue mixing. And it ends up being a little bit like you're trying to make a batter, because without actually having some scales or any ingredients, because you go, okay, this is a little bit too runny, I need to add some more greystone flock, or this is not there's not enough clumping together going on, I need to add some more paint. Now my suspicion is that we're going to need to add more paint to this, because as you might have noticed in the previous part, it was getting ridiculously difficult to stir it without getting it everywhere, so I split it into two separate things. And if it wasn't like making a cake already, we're going to put it in the oven. Now if you live somewhere where it's consistently sunny, then you can just lay this out on a bit of kitchen towel or something and leave it in the sun. That's what I did yesterday, but I'm in the UK and it is pissing it down, so I can't do that today. So instead we're going to experiment by putting this in the oven on a low heat. So what we want is to get this to a dryness where you can crumble it, because that's what we really want. This is the cookery edition of Good Enough Scenery, apparently. So I'm going to leave this in I'm going to check on it in 10-minute intervals, and I'll let you know how long it was until it got dry, and if it starts giving off horrible fumes, then I'll put this as a warning to not do this. And just... So it was in there about 40 minutes in total. I turned up the heat about halfway through, and I was taking a bit of it out, and you end up with this, which has got the larger bits being about the right colour, and then you've got the flock as well, and this is going to be perfect rubble for the ruins and the rest of the board. So our rubble's done, so it's time to put it down. So it's very simple. It's going to put down PVA glue wherever we want rubble to be. So we're going to be filling up most of the things here. So I'm going to get on with that, and then I will show you where I've glued before I go any further. So all of these have been filled in with glue, and also put some bits where there's less space in between, so that there can be rubble in the streets as well. And then from here, it's a case of just kind of sprinkling it over. Now I'm going to be doing a resin pour up to the height of the bottom of this, so I don't want anything sticking up too high. So having that in mind as I'm doing it, but in this kind of central area it can be absolutely fine, and in the streets it can be absolutely however I want it to be as well. Probably don't want anything too big right in the middle. Okay, now I've got some watered down PVA which I'm going to use to completely soak this board. It's going to move some of the stuff around, and that's fine. So trying to do it from above. That's done. I'm going to take some of the greystone flock that we used to make this other flock, and I'm going to give a dusting of this over the top. The final thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use these cut-out pieces just to make sure that these bits underneath aren't too high. So this, squishing that down, and that's going to be fine. That one, not too much in that corner there. So this is enough in place for it to have our resin pour done. The big bits are still going to move around, as you can see, but the smaller bits are in place, and the rest of it's going to get set in place with resin anyway. Before we do the resin pour, with all of the holes here, we don't need to do anything in particular with, because there's nowhere for the resin to go, because it's just for these two central things that we need to make a dam. So I'll show you how I'm going to do this. So I've got some acetate sheet, put just a little bit there, like that. Just going to squidge that into there, and then use, so UV resin, as you might have guessed, is resin which gets set off by UV light. So you can pick up UV resin for £4 or £5 and you get a whole thing of it. You can pick up one of these torches for not very much money. Then you have this thing, and then that should be, so that is set at that end. That can do the same thing at the other end. Then we can just begin to put some resin along the join here. And this sets very quickly. So I'm just going to put a bit in. I'm holding it in place with the torch. So I'm going to do that all the way along the rest of it. I can tell you from personal experience that resin leaks are not fun, so it's better to be overcautious rather than blasé about it, because you don't want to be clearing up loads of resin. Now, the two dams that I made, I'm pretty confident that they're going to be absolutely fine, but to make sure that there's no leak at all, what we can do is pick our hot glue gun, put a bead of hot glue all the way along this edge here. And we'll do that on both of them, just to be sure. Next up, we're going to mix our resin. So this is the one that I use. I've got this from Amazon. I've tried a few different ones. In terms of price and working well, this is what I have found to be the best one. I'll put a link in the video description so you can get it yourself if you want it. This is a 1-to-1 mix, so I'm going to have my clean hand and my dirty hand. Yeah, so wear gloves for this because it's sticky. So fill this glass. Yeah, so 2 of these will be enough. This is dirty river water, so let's make it dirty. So we'll do 3 drips. I mean, you barely need anything when you're doing stuff with resin. 3 drips of that. Mix that in and see what we think of the colour. Now, one of these parts is stickier than the other. I'm going to say what does happen is that the stickier one gets caught on the edges of whatever you're mixing in, so it's important to scrape the sides off as you're mixing this up. What I really like about this kit is that it came with these scrapey tools where the resin doesn't stick to it as much. So we're going to do our pour now. I'll go for that much and see where it gets up to. And give a bit more. So the top of this is covered in resin, which is obviously going to be sticky. So I'm going to take some flock here, just sprinkle it over the highest parts. So I'm going to pour the rest of these, mix up some more resin and just fill all the things in, I guess. You can see all of the resin pours done, and most importantly, this one here has got nothing leaking out of it. And nor was the other one, so you can see my work on that one. So yeah, just wait for them to all set. So it's been about 24 hours and these are all set. You can press and make sure, but I think the tap test is pretty decent. And once that's done, you can then remove this. Now, to be absolutely certain that you can remove this, and when you pull this, it shouldn't move any of this resin here. So as you can see, that's not doing anything apart from bending itself. If it starts moving the resin at all, that means it's not set. So to remove it, all you're going to do is just grab it and pull. Bring off the glue from underneath, to get rid of that. And some of the UV resin that you put on may be around that, like that, but essentially that is done. So the board got to a point where I was actually able to play a couple of games on it without it being fully finished, and I realised that I need to do a couple of things to make it better. So first off, all of this, all of the rocks or rubble bits I am going to take off, because I've realised as well that I can have a building footprint that big with that on top of it, and if there's bits like this which are in the way, then the building's going to be uneven. As you can see, all I'm doing to get rid of them is just, some of them are loose anyway, just rubbing my hand over and they fall off. So I've done on a couple of them already. Take some of this watered down PVA that I sprayed the board with. The rubber that's down here already, I'm going to cover that with watered down PVA, and then I'm going to put some greystone flock over the top of it, just to break it up a bit. My friend commented, and he's probably right, that in places it looks a little bit like it could be straw rather than building rubble because of the colour. So let's get rid of that as a hard to disagree with him in places. Take our greystone flock, let's break up the colour with some, which may not come up on camera, doubt that it will, but okay, so I'm going to do that across the rest of them. We move on to our first raised level. So we've got our 20mm bases that are all the same height. Then we've got these, which are to make it the same height as the other bits. Now I've cut out a huge section of this just because this going on top of here doesn't need all of that space underneath filled in. So now a lot of this is going to be similar to what happened in the other parts of it. So we will be doing the same edging, and we'll be doing exactly the same things with putting the cobblestones down. You don't have to do anything with this section whatsoever, but yeah, this is not the interesting bit. On one half we're just going to have some stairs cut out here, so maybe 2, 3, 4 steps that go up to there. Building footprint here, there's going to be another one here, there's going to be something in the centre there. On this side, this corner is going to be cut off at 45, this is going to be cut off at 45. There's going to be a staircase on an angle up here like this, which I think will look cool. There's going to be a collapsed bit here, which can be scalable. There's going to be a collapsed bit here, which will be scalable as well. And then just a couple of building footprints there, leaving this fairly open. So that is the plan with this bit. So first we need to decide how wide our steps are going to be. So this is 52 centimetres from there to there. So find the midpoint to start off with. In this case, deciding how wide the steps should be. And I feel like the steps should be pretty wide, but I've also said that I want to have a building footprint in the corner here and the corner there. I think maybe 16 or 18, and each step we want to be, I want that to be 1, 2, 3 steps, and each one being 2 centimetres, so a base will fit on it. So I'm just going to roughly draw out a thought I just had. So I quite like the idea of the steps widening. So that's the centre there, that's 18 there, that's 12 there, and I'm going to have it sloping like that, and each one of these is going to be an inch. Or so we'll take our trusty set square, draw a line there, same at the other end. Now this is 30mm foam, so we want 4 steps, so they're going to be 3/4 of a centimetre. So these are our step heights, these are our step depths. So with this top level we only have to go down 3/4 centimetre. Next one we're going to have to go down 1.5 centimetres, a bit further the next one, and this one going down 2.25. The good thing is if you do go down slightly too far, it doesn't matter. Do the same on the other side. Okay, now I'm going to do this front step. Which has instantly made me realise that marking the front is completely pointless, because we're going to cut the markings off in a second. What we can do is we can test. So if that marking there is all the way in, then we have cut down deep enough. Now for the difficult one. We're going to try and start it off with the ruler up here. There's a lot of stuff balancing here. At this point, you can give it a little pull, see where it is stuck, where it feels stuck. It feels a little stuck in the middle here. Sides are definitely okay. That side is anyway. Oh, I'll tell you what. That is about as satisfying a thing as you could wish for. Those cuts are absolutely perfect. Now we need to mark a centimetre and a half from the top down. Now this is going to be tricky to film and tricky to do. Now, marking up the line could absolutely have gone better. So my pen slipped at an inopportune moment. Pretty certain these are the best steps I've ever cut, and I am absolutely delighted with them. Right, so on top of this bit here is going to be the next bit of foam. Yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a little bit off this because it does feel slightly high. It's, you know, the difficult measurements to get bang on, and then when I do the layer of this, we'll have a continuation of this for a fifth step. So there we go, and then there'll be another step there, but I am pretty delighted with how that looks. Having cut this and put it on here, I decided it would be really nice if this angle here could be mirrored over here, and that would still leave space for a building footprint, so I reckon that would look pretty cool. So that's, and I'm going to do the same on this side. It's pretty simple from here. It's 3 centimetres in from the edge, which is there. 10 from there, which brings us up to here, and then mark and cut the other one off camera. So the only thing is I want to make sure that I'm cutting as vertically as possible. Yeah. I think that looks smart, so I'm going to do the same on this side. There's a couple more things to do for this. These are going to be brickwork, so I've got a brick roller here. You can, if you're doing this yourself, you can draw bricks on. I'm not doing that. I want to have small size bricks like this. So my only job really here is to keep the pressure on and try and keep it straight, which I could be doing better right now. So these are looking like that, and I'm going to do the same on the other side. I add some slabs to these steps here, so I've marked every 2 centimetres, and I'm use my set square here to go first across and then down like that. And I'll do that with the other ones as well, and put those steps in that want them to look a lot more stone-like, so I'm going to use our classic tinfoil rolling technique, but it's more of a dabbing technique than a rolling thing. So we don't really want to roll it too much, otherwise we'll lose the definition and the squareness of the steps. Don't mind losing it a little bit, but not too much. Get it looking like that. So we've got our steps and our bricks done. Bricks here could have been better, but they're not. Next we're going to make the top part. We shall get a new board. I'm going to mark out this for cutting. So I'm going to square it up with the corner there, and I'm not going to try and cut it straight away. All I'm doing right now is just marking out the size. So this should be exactly the right size with just the corners poking out, which it is. I've got some lines here, but let's check they are good lines. So remember it was 3, that's bang on, and that was 10. Slightly over, but you know what? Well, it's a fraction of a mil over, but I don't actually mind that. Fine, and then cut in here that we need to do. I'll mark this on here. They should be 18 apart. So there will be 9. There's a set square. Okay, so the set stairs was 10 centimetres. That point there, and this was 12 wide. Getting that up. Well, let's cut this out and see. I mean, it's going to be close. I mean, we can always make adjustments if we need to. A little bit off. Could be a lot worse. Okay, let's continue this line. It's 1 inch step. So what I'm going to do with this, in a very small step. And there we go. Took a bit of effort, but we got there in the end. Next up, we're going to put our building footprints in. So I said they are going to be in the centre of these. Now, it's just a case of carefully cutting this out. Okay, and I'll do exactly that on this side. Okay, I'm going to do the stones around this. So I'm going to do it with a slight difference. I'm going to have a whole section at the front here and the front here, probably as far as up to here, where I'm going to just have square tiles for a bit of variety in it. So it'll be square tiles here, and then cobblestone from there. So we know this is 2 centimetres in, so we can start by using nice and easy there. So that's what we've got going on there. Is do what I've done on the previous lower boards, where I have a 10mm trim to it. So that trim bit is done. It is too wide for this, so I'm going to mainly keep the pressure on this side of it, and we'll see how badly wrong it goes. Don't think that could have gone much better. Need to put a bit more definition on a few bits over here. case of this drawing with a biro lightly, but other than that, it went about as well as it could have done. Okay, that's the upper section all done. Nothing complicated on this lower section. So I'm going to mark in a centimetre here, centimetre down here. Yes, you guessed it. First we're going to draw a line, and then we're going to mark every 1 centimetre. Okay, that's the trim done. I've decided that I'm going to roll that way, and then fill in the middle bit. So yeah. Last minute, realising that I should do this as trim as well, just to make the board joins as seamless as possible. There we have it. Hopefully if I grab another board it will look awesome next to it. Yeah, looks great. Okay, time to do some work on the other half of the 30mm high section. So we're going to start off by taking off the corners here, then make them into more of an octagonal shape. So to match the other side to a degree, we'll have a little bit of symmetry. I'm going to do it, so the other ones, if you remember, were 3 in and then 10. This is going to be 10 and 10. So it's 10 there, 10 there. I might cut that with a hot wire cutter. Next up we're going to put brickwork all the way around using my brick roller. Ta-da! Right, I've had a really good / stupid idea. I've been thinking that these high areas are not really accessible to cavalry at all. So a slope rather than some steps at this point. So I still have to have some steps here, but I might make it a slope. But I'm going to try something really stupid instead. So I'll have it 50mm wide, and I want it to be about, I think about 10 centimetres. My plan is to try and do something really clever with a hot wire cutter. Cutting into this slope, that's the problem. I want it to be, create a nice slope. This is definitely not going to work, but we're going to give it a go anyway. This 30mm thick, which is there like that. So the plan is that I'm going to bring it in at this angle here, and then just slide it like that, cut into it. And this stops it going too far. No guts, no glory, as they say. So I put it on against there, and then and out again. Could have gone better, but that's not actually that bad. I mean, that's pretty good. Just a little bit of tidying up. These lines are nice and straight, so that's good. Right, so check back to my design. So I'll do the broken bit, which is just going to be cutting into it. So I'm just going to beat this bit here until a bit breaks off. Like that. Okay, and then we'll have another broken bit over here. In terms of the basics, that's that bottom part done. We do just need a top bit to match up with that. case of deciding where the building footprints are going to be. Okay, after thinking over it for what seems like 100 hours, I decided that I'm going to have an L shape here, which means that, because I feel like there's, with this having nice steps leading up to it, there should be something relatively significant. So I want to have an option of a big building up here, so I'm going to have this L here, exactly where I'm not sure, probably as far back into the corner as I dare. So all around these edges, I'm going to do a 1 centimetre trim as I've done previously. As with other building footprints, we're going to do a 20mm tiles all around them. Last thing we need to do is our cobblestones, which I'm hoping to do as much as possible with the roller. And finally, we're going to give this a roll of our tin foil. So a couple of things are going to happen between now and when you next see it. Most importantly, it is going to be painted just like I painted it in the previous part of the series. If you haven't watched that video, then go and check it out. You should be seeing a link appear on your screen right about now. So go and check that out so you can see how I achieve what I achieve for when you next see it. So let's get back into the next stage of things. I've added all sorts of little bits of damage, big bits, small bits. Now it's time to put some paint on these walls. So the base coat of this is going to be this creamy, yellowy type existence. So I don't really want to be getting onto the whatever these are, flagstone things, because the way I'm probably going to do this is I'm going to do all of the bottom part with this makeup brush, because I can do it quickly, and then the edges I'll do with a brush with a straighter edge. That is my plan. So the paint on the walls is now dry, so I'm going to give it a dry brush in white, just use. I've played a couple of games on this board and I've been wondering why I haven't stuck these down yet. It seems like a simple thing just to stick them down. Now I'm trying to get as much modularity to this board as possible, so once it's stuck down, that's where it is. So I've been wondering about, or maybe I don't stick it down, I have it just move it around the place, maybe I create a huge space here with different tiles to go down, but I've taken a couple of pieces here, or sorry, 3 pieces here of 10mm thick foam, and what's going to happen is these 2 here are going to be stuck down to this board here. This one here is going to be stuck to the underneath of that, which means that this will be free to slide all the way to that edge and all the way over that edge and anywhere in between. But it should be very, very sturdy, moving that way and that way, and it's pretty big, so I don't think it's going to get knocked. I mean, I could come up with a locking mechanism, but I really can't be bothered. So that means that rather than it just being like this, it could be in the middle like that, it could be up to one edge like that, up to one edge like that, and it could be like that if you wanted to, add some stairs in and stuff. I mean, it just means that there's more options available. So, like I said, this isn't complicated. All that's going to happen is that I'm going to measure in halfway. Yeah. Just going to take our instant nails, going to put a bit down the middle there. It's going to go exactly there. This next one, I'm going to put this here to position the other one. Found later I'll stick this one to that one. So for now, just going to allow these two to dry, and I'm going to do the same on the other board. It wouldn't be a good idea without some sort of downside, and the downside as far as this idea of it moving is concerned is that I can't really have piles of rubble on these parts here because these are going to move around. So what we need to do is actually fill this in with something. So I've taken a foam offcut here. Cut it out. Precision is not key. Then fit in there like that. So that can be glued in there like that, and we can have a rubble pile in there. And do the same with this one. A bit of tin foil roll just for completeness. I'm not going to bother painting these, but that solves that particular problem. The other problem I've created with my idea is the underneath part. So if it's all the way over here, then we're not too bad. I'm going to sort out this bit I've already done. This bit needs to be made to look like floor underneath. The problem is when we go the other way, there is this gap underneath. Spare foam, cut it off. Going to do our roll, going to do our dry brush, going to do our probably going to make it, rather than cobblestones, where there's a join here, I'm going to make it into this type of thing underneath. Yeah, nothing exciting on you to see, so just telling you what I'm doing. Okay, these two pieces here are solid enough that we can now glue the top. Gonna have some working time with it anyway. And I'm going to put some weight on top of it. And I'm going to do the same on the other one. We have this. We have this. We can position it where we'd like to position it. Okay, so a few things need sticking down. Just put, and then just slide it into place like that. Same thing over here. And our PVA out, and all in here, all over here. Something like that, I think. And then take out our massive bits of brick, but we're using them. Okay, bigger bits can go on here. I'll go overkill on this because we do want it to still look like a model could climb up and over it and stuff. But alright, majority of that is going to stick down, but that's fine. So we have our boards, not finished, but here they are at the moment, and we have our holes that our scatter terrain piece is going to go in. Now these have all been cut out by hand, so they're not going to be 100% accurate. They're going to be pretty close. So, so for instance, this hole here and this one here, I can, if I try really hard, I could get that in and it would fit and it would be okay. What we want is to be able to move the scatter terrain around fairly easily. So what I'm going to do is just trim off a couple of millimeters, a couple from that way, a couple from that way, just 2 mil. And this means that then we have when we have our scatter terrain piece, it can have a nice snug fit, and then when we want to get it out, we can simply put something underneath and just lever it out. Same applies to these longer ones. So once again, just here. Which means this can now slot in here, slot in here, this one can slot in there like that. All of it's I've cut out. This is not Baldwin. A lot more, some of which I've already done. I'm going to just trim off a couple of mil from each edge. So these all been trimmed down, and next is where the fun's going to begin, because we get to actually decide what we're going to be doing with these as you know, as footprints for buildings or whatever. But the very first thing we're going to do, a lot of them, is very, very simple. So I'm going to take a piece, and I'm going to get the cobblestone roller, and just going to press down really hard. And these are basically the same width, so just one roll straight over and that's done. And the same thing with the longer ones. And for some pieces, all we're going to want to do with them is to plug gaps. We may want this as open ground. If we want it as open ground, then we can just slot in a couple of these, and obviously need painting and stuff, but all of a sudden we have some a bit of open ground. Some of these are going to be cobblestone rolled, some of these are not going to need anything on them at all, and some of them I may do like a kind of a square brick pattern, as I've done with some of the rest of the board. Now, as I've mentioned before, this is going to have some resin poured up to the height of the bottom. We need options for if it's flooded, because we can have it just that's flooded and you've got this kind of square footprint thing that's flooded in, but there are ways of making it look even more realistic than that. So if I take one of my smaller pieces here, and I'm going to just cut in randomly like that, and then just tear up the surface a little at the edges, something like that. I'm going to do the same for this one, and decide which way up I should go. So I'm going to go for this way. Chuck a cobblestone roll across the top. I have to ask you to use your imagination slightly on this one, but imagine this has got the kind of resin core puddle type thing going on. We can just slot this in here like that, and this one in here like that, for example, and then rather than it being a really obvious square that's filled in with some resin, you have these bits on top which makes it look like there's a building footprint which no longer exists. So with some rubble going on in there and some resin going in there, those are going to look pretty awesome. Also the same could apply over here like this, make it much more like it was something was really going on with it. So just cutting them in half, breaking them up a little bit. You could even have the two together like that, and that looks very cool. Work out which ones go together, then you've got a building footprint that's got a big crack in it. So multiple options. So I even just came up with a new option myself without even realising. So that is another thing that you can do. Oh, of course, the same applies with your larger ones. So what we'll do is, and then we'll snap it, cut into the surface somewhat. We'll sell the idea like a downward slope into the water here, and then tear that up a bit, and then roll over the top. And then once it's getting across the edge here, just putting more weight onto that side. I don't really want to cobblestone in this area. So for a larger area like that, probably more like one like that, and we can do exactly the same with this one. In fact, I think that's going to look so good that I'm going to show you that too. Really doesn't have to take long at all. Then those two can slot in like that. You'll have to imagine what the resin underneath is going to make it look like, and that's pretty awesome and very low effort. So I'm going to make a few of them. Not sure how many yet. So these half pieces need to have an base coat as well. So once again, I'm just going to use white and just slap it on like that. Nothing complicated whatsoever. Just painting, 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 painting. Now I do want this to match with my other, or the rest of the board. So now this has been base coated. Going to take some blue, and I'm going to just pick out random stones and just paint them blue. It doesn't have to be the most neat painting in the world, but there's no reason to overly rush it. It's going to take some time, but the end result I think is worth it. But it's good enough scenery, so you could stop there and go, that looks like cobblestones. You stop whenever it's good enough for you. So we're using a blue, I'll be using a brown, I'll be using an orangey type colour, and I'm going to be using actually bone white as well. That's probably enough. And we want these half tiles to match the rest of the board, so I'm just going to take some blue here and pick out some random stones, just like I have on the rest of the cobblestone bits. Just painting them, not thinking too much about which one I'm doing, just basically what I do is whichever one catches my eye when I look down at it, I do that one. Just try and avoid it looking, we don't want it to be a pattern, we want it to be random. So move on, do another colour now. Next up, leather brown, and doing exactly the same thing, just picking out random stones and painting them. It's that simple. Next up we've got bronze flesh tone, not one I'm ever going to use on someone's skin, so let's use it on here to make some colourful cobblestones. Finally we've got bone white here. So next stage of this is just to get our brush. This has got some white paint which I've got the excess off on that bit there, and we're just going to go all over the top, and we'll leave that to dry. Next up we're going to put a dark wash on this before dry brushing it again. So this is basically a grey wash. The final thing we're going to do is we're going to finish up with just a dry brush, so white dry brush. There we go. So not all of the floor in this build is cobblestone, so we want some pieces that go in which are not just cobblestones like the rest of them. So these ones we're just going to put a really simple grid on. Now these are just under 10 centimetres because we took a little bit of trim off of them. So put this 1 mil in from each edge, then mark every 2 centimetres. Do the same at the other edge, I won't use up. And then the same in a perpendicular way as well. Okay, with that done, I'm going to roll it with the tin foil, give it a stony texture, and then that is now ready for painting. Exactly the same thing is going to happen with a bunch of other these. Some of these are going to be used as filler pieces, and other of them are going to be the base for buildings. So I'm going to do a few of them because they don't take very long. So I've marked out a few of these, so now it's just simply a case of getting us some white paint and doing a base coat. Doesn't have to be in any way clever, it's just a case of covering it in paint, getting into all of the details, just like we have with all of the other pieces. So not a lot to see here, that's basically one done already, and then move on to the next. So I'm going to do that. So this rough base coat is now dry, so I'm going to put a grey wash over the whole thing. Put way too much on the brush, so I'm going to spread that across a few of them. But this is as quick as just that. Even that might have too much, I might have to scrape some off. Anyway, you get the idea. So now the wash is dried on these, we can take some white paint on the brush and we're just going to dry brush this. Pick out that detail. That simple. Right, time to do something a little bit more important. So, not real life. I'm going to make a central objective piece. So we've got some 20 centimetres square things to fill in the middle of a couple of pieces. So start with a 20mm bit of foam, which we're immediately going to put to one side, do something with that later. Now the idea here is to build some sort of statue with plinth, and I'm taking advantage of a new tool that I've treated to myself. So I have my hot wire cutter as normal, and I bought something from Shifting Lands. I bought a few things to treat myself, and they are really awesome. Let me show you what's going to happen with this. So I'm going to start off with a bit of foam, and I'm going to start with a decagon shape, which is 10-sided. And so what we're going to do is going to place this here all the way through, and that's going to hold it in place. It doesn't matter that it's gone through to the other side. And this is where it gets really clever. So I want this to be 6 inches across because this is going to work as a central objective. So to make it easy for myself when I'm playing, I can basically say, look, if you're on that bit of it, then you are within 6 inches. So 6 inches across is just over, so that's 15.2. So I want this to be 7.2, I reckon. No, 7.1. So move this until it's at, there's a mark saying 70 there, and that's just a smidge more. That is definitely close enough. Now this is where it gets ridiculously clever. So take this part here and we fit it into this little slidey bit. And we line up the slidey bit there, and we turn our hot wire cutter on and we make a cut. Then we can turn it, slot it back in to a different angle. So we're going to do 10 cuts each angle perfectly defined by the position that this is taken up on this. It's easier once it gets a little bit smaller. You don't have to do the cuts in order. Again, you also can't see where you're trying to line up with unless you pick it up and move it. And we have it. Perfect. Might not be perfect. Certainly good enough. I think it's a decagon. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. So that can be positioned in the centre like that. So I'm going to move down to a smaller size and a less sided shape. So we have our hexagon thing, and I've set this to be at 10 centimetres around. I'm going to move that ever so slightly, 2 mil. So we slot it into the appropriate thing, make sure it's turned on. We have our hexagon, go on here at some angle yet to be determined. Actually seeing how much space there is on the outside of this, I'm actually going to put this back in and make it smaller. So I'd like models to be able to sit on this step more comfortably. So shouldn't need to, if there was a centimetre more on each thing, and give it about a centimetre and a half. This is going to be smaller. And the good thing is if you're just making it smaller, then it's really obvious where the angles are that you need to turn the thing to. That seems a bit more sensible. It seems just a little bit too cramped there. So that's going to look like roughly with a statue in the middle. But in terms of what we're going to do with this, I'm going to choose the good side here, and I'm just going to draw lines on opposite points here, and then down the point as well. Roll with our thing, re-establish these a little bit, and do the sides. Do the same with this, and the same thing. Don't have to go all the way into the centre on this because it's going to get covered up anyway. And these lines should match up, which is why I went for the hexagon, and I think it's a dodecagon, it's 12-sided. And the question is what happens with these outside ones, which should be a continuation of these lines. I think that probably makes sense, but it's also not the easiest thing to do. So would there be a line? Is there a line? 45 degrees, or is it? No, it's in between that. So we will draw the centre part of this line here, the centre part of this line across here. That gives us the centre. And then, it's going to end up a bit like a clock face now, so I've marked middle waypoint there, and I'm going to go through centre here and through that point there. We are first one. I use our protractor here, and we know that we want to have one every 30 degrees, so that's here. And we don't have to do both sides, which is good, because we don't. And if this goes horribly wrong, then there's another side to this bit of foam. I'm confident that it's going to be good enough. Let's see. Perfect? No. Good enough? Yes. So it's kind of cool. And this needs some sort of statue in the middle. I'm not sure exactly. I made this with a hot wire cutter and a knife. Maybe that, I don't know. But next up, our classic, whatever this is called, tin foil rolling, just under 15, just under 20, so 2.5. That's positioned 2.5 in that edge, and just line up the lines, which don't have to be perfect, but that's where that will be glued down. And then with this one, we have 2.5 in again, isn't it? So that's where we'll glue them. Good amount of glue to the underside of here. Line up the lines best I can, and then press down. And line up with there, line up the rest of the lines. They're not perfect, but they are good enough. A little bit of working time with the hot glue gun, but not a lot. But that will be enough. Next up, we're going to slap a white base coat on this. So nothing complicated, just as you can see, absolutely smothering it in paint and spreading it all over. The base coat is dry on this, and now I'm going to put a black wash, maybe a grey wash, whatever colour this is, the whole thing before dry brushing it in white. Done. That wash is now dry, so we can now dry brush this in white. All of the texture that we've got by putting the tin foil roll on it. Need some sort of something in the middle, but I think that looks pretty cool as a central thing. Some sort of statue, not sure what yet. So this looks way too clean to exist within a ruined city, so we're going to chuck some rubble down on it, and I think that's quite literally. So I'm going to not even really think about where glue is going, chuck some down. To a degree it's going to be everywhere, but some places more than others, like that. And that's pretty much literal. I'm going to give this a jiggle. I think something like that's pretty good. overdo it. But cool. Give this a light spray. Use some of our gravestone to break it up. And I'll leave that to dry. I don't think it makes any sense for any tiles that are like plain just to exist as plain. So let's chop a little rubble down. Rather than the big rubble piles that I've done before, is it just going to be accented with it, shall we say? Something like that. And hey, let's just try this. Cool. Maybe try and squish that in a little, but basically fine. I'm going to give it a spray and then sprinkling of gravestone as well. Much more like it. So I'm also going to do this on these ones which are filling in part of the resin pours, so it makes sense for those to have some rubble bits leading down towards the thing. Not just on the edges, more towards the edges there. The other option is to kind of sprinkle it across that, give it a shake. An accent of rather than a full-on rubble pile like that. So I can move that across there. Definitely these two. This one I'll make into a corner thing. Onto our top layer now, and design has changed ever so slightly from what I drew out, because I realised the importance of actually having a slope so that category models can actually get up and down, otherwise that's going to be ridiculous. So these corners are going to be cut off and it's the same angle, 45 degrees as the previous one. But in the centre here there's going to be a slope going from wherever it cuts off here, up here like this. If it went in that way then it would take up too much of the centre. Because in the middle here there's going to be a 20 by 20 to act as a potential central objective. And then in the flat corners, these are going to be straight cut, they're not going to be angled, but they are going to have a set of stairs either side, meaning that there's room for a couple of building things in the middle there. That is going to be the plan. So we'll start off with this one, and we're going to cut the corners off our 45-degree angle. We want it to match up the other one, so it's going to be 10 and 10 again. And these I am going to cut with the hot wire cutter, I think, because I think that's going to be a better cut. So I'm going to do that off camera. I was right, look at those lovely cuts. They all do. So now it's just decide how much of a slope I want to be putting on this. So if you look at how much we've got to work with here, we've got 30, 32 centimetres maybe. Nice if there was a bit of space, and then a slope, and then a bit of space. So before we had it 5, I'll tell you what, thinking about, so I'm thinking that it came to here and then went a centimetre and then it went in by 5, that because that's how wide the whole thing is going to be, and then we had 5, where's my set square, the ever disappearing set square. So we have 5 centimetres of probably, I should cut right in, so it might be 5 of flat, and I want 5 of flat at the other end after cutting in a centimetre. Very much kind of thinking out loud at the moment. 5 along here. So if it was sloped from there up to, I mean that seems like a pretty decent slope. I don't know how hard it will be to cut. Mark it out and see what we think. So we're all about having a slope from there to, I mean I don't hate it, just wondering the very best way of cutting that nicely. So as with a lot of things, I might just go for it. Stuff doesn't need to cut out that. I don't want to go all the way down. Yeah, so I want to go on at least some floor there. I don't think it would look terrible, so I might just go for it. But how is the answer? What question about that? Oh, this we know that we can cut down. Yeah, decided on making this far too difficult for myself, and it's better I just cut this all out and then replace it. That's going to be the way. Okay. All the way through there, and that's a decent cut, and then this bit here, and we'll just put it back in again rather than trying to do a really complicated cut. Because that's cool. It's now cutting this line that's difficult, but this has gone pretty well, so it might not be the worst idea to just cut it with a knife. That's maybe a terrible idea, but I've decided that I'm just going to try and cut it carefully with a knife. It'd be a really bad decision, but we learn together. First I'll change myself a new blade. I'll just go slow and steady here. I mean, come on. That's perfect. So as with previous ones, I'm going to put the texture on it. So here I'm going to put cobblestones violently as well. And then here as well.
Let's do a tiny slope here where the top bit's going to go on, and then around all of the edges do our bricks. So this is what I've got designed on the other half of the higher board. I really want to try and make it look kind of fancy, and I really like the angle that the lower board cut out. So what I've done is I've replicated that angle here and here. I'm going to have two widening staircases. Hopefully they're going to work really well, but we will see. So this is where we've cut down and mark my verticals there, and just try and make it as good as the last big cut that I did. So the only thing left to do is to mark out where these are going to be cut out to, which is the trickiest thing of all, because it's one of those things where it's fractions of centimetre. So yeah, 0.8, which is going to be there. After that, it's going to be finished slightly early there. Do some cutting. I'm going to start with this cut here. I just have to go along this line and down less than a centimetre, and if I go down a bit further, it's okay. Let's get our ruler in for this. Not entirely sure how I'm finishing this, but I know how I'm starting it. So the only thing that needs to be done is to cut in that way. So maybe I do all of the vertical cuts and then all the horizontal ones. Don't know, but these need cutting either way, so let's cut them. I'll keep this in line with my vertical line I've got here. Try. So is that the best way of doing it? Probably not. Once again, I think the best thing to do is actually, if I want a slope, is to cut the whole thing off, then add the slope if I want it. And that will allow us to actually get to cut it off properly. Marking on the side here, fine there. So I cut these stairs out, which was a bit of an effort, and I've rolled them with some tin foil, and this one not done that side yet. Just wanted to kind of show you the difference. But with these, how I've cut this out, because I didn't think about it enough, I realised there's a couple of gaps there. So all I've done is taken a couple of excess bits of foam, rolled them with the roller, and then those will fill in like that. And a bit later on, I'll probably do something to either try and cover up that line or make it into a crack or something like that. So that's what I'm going to be doing that. Now next up with this is to put our brick detail on. So this is much the same, or exactly the same as we have done previously. So just taking our roller and we're going to press down nice and hard and roll it along here, doing our best to keep it straight, which for some reason I find really hard. So going to do similar on there and along there and on the back as well. So get on with that. Time to do the top for this one, so I'm going to cut a sheet that's 26 first of all. Time to make the top part of this, so I've started by cutting a sheet to a rough approximation of the size of here. So we don't need to cover the stairs, so we're doing this bit here. So it's going to require a bit of thinking. So we know it goes up to there, here, then you need to come out to measure that. And we want it to be a step as well. So it's going in there, it's an extra 2 centimetres. I'm going to go in just 4.7. So 8 in and then 4.7. We go in 8, trusty set square. I'm just going to go 4.7 basically there. Hopefully this point here is going to go along this line there, which it does. The same on this side. 8 to there. Check how square this is, it doesn't look square to me. It's just that corner that's missing a bit. 0.7 is there, and draw it along the front. Now, I'm thinking this is going to end up being slightly too big. But slightly too big is better than slightly too small. But let's just cut it out and find out. It's pretty good to me, so you need to cut this out, but certainly good enough. I'd say that's pretty good. Slightly bigger here. But it's foam, we can actually push it in a bit, or just squash it out a bit. So that's going to be fine. So this top part, it actually became pretty simple for me to decide exactly where the buildings are going to go. So one half of a 20 by 20 is going here, and then can have 2 buildings here like that. So these are going to be nice and simple to cut out, just like any of the other ones that you may have seen me do. So nice sharp knife, lining up. Maybe, depending on how sharp your knife is, you may want to go through slowly, so you may want to do a score line like that, then go a little bit deeper, and then on a third cut maybe you go just cutting out like that. So I'm going to do the same with these two as well. So for those cut out, it's time to add in our floor detail. So I'm ignoring about what this should be like, because you've got building things here. Yeah, so what I might do is, I think for the most part it's going to be 2 by 2 squares across the whole of here, maybe not along here, and then the 1 centimetre trim around there. I think that, I don't know, I'm making up as I go along. So let's say that this building footprint needs to have a 20mm squares around it. So let's start with that and then see what it looks like. Drawing up over here, from here to here, and we can put our lines in. Trying to do them pretty straight, but not being too worried if they're not perfectly straight. Got a choice here to make whether these are going to be aligned perfectly or whether they're going to be just off. How far is? I don't know. I think it probably looks a bit more interesting. Does it look more interesting if they're misaligned? I don't know. What do they do on the other one? I think in terms of uniformity, it should be, these squares should continue in a grid rather than being misaligned. So that's what I'm going to do. Also makes them a lot easier to do. Just draw lines that way, I can draw lines that way. So I'm going to finish doing some squares and then see where I'm up to. So unlike previous ones where I've done the trim, I've decided that the whole top of this and the other 50mm high one is going to be just these squares like that. And then finished off by rubbing the tin foil over it just to create some stony texture. But that is going to be it for that. So that is the top of that one done once I finish all this rolling. So I need the top piece made for this. So we'll start by cutting out an appropriate sized piece. Square, that's square. Okay, looking good so far. This corner needs to come off. That's a very solid start. Cutting out all of that here. Surprise, I can't find my set square. Is this 5? That's 5. That is beautiful. I need to decide what's happening here, whether it's going to be, it could be a continuation of a slope, or it could be a flat and then some slope here. Or could try and let's try and continue this slope. If this goes wrong, I can just cut it off. It could have gone a lot worse. How does it look? No. Yep, we'll go with that. Let's look at my plan as to where other buildings are going. So we know that there's going to be one here that needs to match up with the other one. And the plan that basically gone out the window, so that's really there like that. Do we need anything else? Do we want anything else? So looking at the other top that this is going to join up to, I decided that I'm actually perfectly fine with this just having one single thing in it and this just being open space, which is going to be squares as well. So I'm going to cut that out that I've already marked, and then I'm going to draw squares across the whole rest of the thing, and then that'll be that done. There's the top done with the grid rolled with tin foil. So the only thing that needs to happen in terms of just the basic design of it is just to fill in these gaps here, here and down here with a little bit of foam just so that that's finished off. But other than that, it's done. So what I'm going to do with this one instead is put it onto here, get that down. I've got these little pieces here. These really aren't going to be going anywhere because they're going to be trapped under something else anyway, but that. Now I'm not going to be gluing this part onto here just yet, but I am going to be sticking this part onto this part, so in exactly the same way. Hey check. Now we do want to clear up these side bits here, we don't want this setting solid, so just with a finger, just clearing it out, smearing it down, but definitely not leaving. Oh chick, no, you've been fed. Now I'm going to do some work on the walls. So we've got this brick pattern that's been put all the way around, and in some places like this we've got some broken bits, so it doesn't really make sense for them to be like that. So let's cut these bricks out. One of the main places I'm going to do it is where I really messed up on the stairs here. So, as I often say with good enough scenery, that if you can't hide it, then accentuate it. So, really going to tie into the idea of this being broken and collapsed by, rather than that being a line that's just straight down, there's going to be a whole bunch of bricks that are going to have fallen out, and then I'll kind of double down on that by having a bunch of rubble that's fallen down the side. So mostly this is going to be collapsed, I think. I mean, I could just make it entirely collapsed, that would be kind of cool. Let's see what it looks like when we've taken a few of these bricks out. I'm not trying to pull any particular brick out here, I'm just running my fingernail down it and just seeing what comes out, and I think that looks kind of cool. I don't think I'm going to completely collapse it, but I think that's going to sit with what I want it to look like. Again, it's going to cut through some brick lines, and then see what wants to come out of there. I think that works and it looks damaged. I might just really open this bit up. I'd love to get rid of that kind of straight down line that doesn't make any sense. That looks pretty decent. So that's the sort of thing along here where that's not gone, where the brick roll is joined. Again, good opportunity to put some damage in there as well. So I'm going to go around and do that sort of thing across all of these different walls, but that's the technique that I'm going to be using. So just like on the midsection, what I've done here is I've attached a strip here that lines up with this here, which means that this can be in place so it doesn't move anywhere, but it can also be positioned from side to side, so you can have it there or anywhere in between. Now, next up we want to add some rubble detail. Now, the main place I'm going to be adding this is along here and in this, all the way along this thing here, so it looks like this wall has crumbled down into it. And we're doing a little bit on top as well. So it's going to take our PVA and just apply some all over here. Can do some on the outer part as well. Just remind myself where this comes up to. Carrying that down, we'll take our rubble, mainly concentrating on the smaller bits. So we don't want this interfering with the slidey part. I'll just about do it. What I'm going to do is just actually put this in and slide it back and forth just to make sure it's not too high on the outside as well, knowing this is not all going to stick, but just do a spray on top of this, and we'll finish this off by sprinkling some grey stone on top just to break up the colour. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add some on the top here, there's a few little rubble piles, and I'm going to add some on the other board as well in the same way. So unlike the other tiles in this build, which started with a 20mm base and then a 10mm on top, we're going to have a 10mm base with 20mm on top, but not across the whole way. So I've cut two strips which are the same length as the tile, and these are 50mm wide, deep, whatever. We'll do some more with this in a bit, but before we do that, we're going to concentrate on these. So we're going to start by rolling with tin foil to give it some texture. That's going to go across the whole thing. So we've got a bit of texture on here. Next thing is to choose a favourite side, and I don't think one is either better than the other. I've got my brick roller here. You could do this with a knife and carve in individual bricks, but given that these are little bricks to match with the other little bricks, I'm not going to do that. So all you have to do here is make sure that you're rolling in a pretty straight line, which I feel like I sometimes make harder than it needs to be. Just get on with it. Definitely went horribly wrong there. It's not that hard, just roll it in a straight line press. Already looking more like it. So we'll do the top to match up with the edge of the tiles, which is a 1cm square thing, or 1cm squares. So I'm going to put this in line with my grid mat here, which has got centimetre marks, and I'm going to go along and I'm going to put a mark on every single centimetre here. Then I'm going to flip it and then do the same on the other side. So we've got marks every 1cm on this side of this one and this side of this one. So if I line them up, then I can save myself a bit of a job by doing 2 in 1. So just drawing a line through from one to the next across both sides. bit of firm pressure with a biro just to indent it, just like I've done in previous things. So I'm going to go all the way across there, and then I'm going to measure a centimetre intervals here, and I'm going to do the perpendicular ones as well. So next time you see these will be all gritty, which is probably not a word. Don't care. Gritty. Well, won't you look at that? It's all gritty, just like I promised. So next up we are going to paint the bricks, and we're going to do so in it's mine. You don't own me. You don't own this. My undercoat colour here. The top is going to be white. Trying not to go onto that white. Yeah, just going to give a base coat of this to begin with. Now I'm going to do a base coat of white on all of this grid stuff. Got a makeup brush here, and just literally going to cover the whole thing, the whole top. So this base coat is dry on the top here, and I've got a dark grey wash, which I'm just going to cover the entire thing in. And after that I will be dry brushing it. I'm going to dry brush this whole thing in white, so I'm going to start with the bricks here. A lot of this is going to be underwater anyway, so more than anything else to make it consistent with the rest of the board. And I'm going to do the top as well. Much more of a dry brush than when we did the base coat earlier. Actually trying to just pick out the detail by keeping the brush perpendicular. There we go. Now I'm tempted to do something really clever with this river in terms of modularity and having bits interchangeable in the water itself. So I've cut these blocks. So these are 4 centimetres square, and they are 1.5 centimetres tall, and I've got these other two over here which are 10 centimetres by 4 centimetres, which are essentially these with a thing in the middle. Now what I'm going to try and do, and it has worked on a test piece, is cut out a perfectly square hole from the middle of this using the hot wire cutter. Could use a knife. I think I can get a decent level of accuracy using the hot wire cutter, so this is how I'm going to do it. On the lowest heat possible, I set this gauge to 1 centimetre, and I'm going to slide this, let it slowly cut. I'm not going to rush it. I'm going to push this until I hit the 30mm mark on the other side, which is there. I'm going to stop. I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to do the same thing again, not rushing it, just letting it go through. I get to 30, which is there, and rotate it. Last one. Just going to turn it on quickly just to wire out again. End up with a cut like that, and a piece that I can take out, which is it's not exactly square. I think these corners could push these corners, or push all the sides in a bit. Take advantage of the fact that this foam compresses. But I'm going to do that on the other ones. I think that all that's probably going to happen is this is probably going to be trimmed down ever so slightly, but not a huge amount. We'll see. But I'm going to do that on these 4. I also want to do the same thing on these. And I could do it as 4s, but just trying to think how. No, I've changed my mind. I'm going to turn these into 4s as well. So there'll be 6 of these when you next see them. No, 8 of these when you next see it. Let me explain what's going to happen with these things that I've made. So I've got the square things with square holes, and obviously I'm going to be making a couple of boards. Now these are going to act as, in the main board I've got the big squares which buildings slot into. These are going to have the pegs which hold scenery in place. So these are going to hold any bridges or scattered terrain which is going to go on the river. So it's important that these are accurately placed. So it's going to be, just kind of roughly show, you're going to have 2 there like that, then acting as pairs like that in the middle, and then on the far edges which are going to be off camera. But basically the idea is going to be 4 places in which bridges can just be slotted in and moved around. So it's important to get the position of these not perfectly accurate, but as accurately as we possibly can. So I'll show you how I'm going to do that. So So starting with this edge one, so let's checking this is 30 centimetres. So we know that I'm going to put a mark here at 15. We want it to be 1 centimetre in from the edge, which is along here. I want it to be 2 centimetres either side of the centre, so let's continue this centre line. Probably not coming up on camera, but I've created a score mark that shows like a C, so hopefully if I put this up against it, yeah, show exactly where that one is going to go. So that's how I'm going to put down that one and at the opposite end, and the same on the other tile. That will be 4 of them. A little more difficult too, positioning these centrally halfway, which will be here. The halfway point between there. So I've got the dead centre of the board sorted out. I need to be centimetre gap, just like we had on this here. Accurately position them. So I'm going to do the same, exact same thing on the other tile, and then hopefully we'll have 8 things down, or 4 pairs of things essentially, but split pairs. And in terms of gluing it down, I've got the hot glue gun on a lower setting, heat-wise, and just essentially going to go for it really. Where it's split there, I'm not even going to try and glue that together. I'm just going to make sure there is glue all around. So that one going in there, I'm going overboard with how much glue, taking my time to line it up with these carefully measured things, pressing it down. We have it. We'll find out later on whether I've measured that accurately or not. So we know that we're going to have a strip along here, come out to there, a strip along there, come out to there. Everything else outside of that, I'm just going to give a quick roll with a tin foil ball just to create a little bit of a texture. So everything kind of past there and there, just a bit of a roll. I'm going to push down fairly firmly in the centre bit so create some extra depth. This is going to be filled in with all sorts of rubble and stuff, but just to make it look a little different. So that's all done, so just to give it a bit more life, I'm going to go over it with some white paint. And chances are that a huge amount of this is going to be covered up with rubble anyway, so this is more than anything just to stop it being just dull. Something like that will be fine, so I will now leave that to dry. Now stick these side pieces down. Use our hot glue gun for this. Looks a lot better when it's hot. Come on you! That glue down, it's just a case of lining it up with the ends, and lining up with the side. Some weight on it. Same on the other edge. The rolling pin's out and that can only mean one thing, it's time to cause some damage. So in these middle sections here, I want there to be areas which have collapsed. So it'll be a case of smacking it in a few places. Something like that. And then any bits that are half broken off, I'm going to pull off entirely. And that can go towards, I have a bit more broken there. Obviously you don't have to smack it with a rolling pin, you can use a knife and whatever. So a bit more control with it, more or less. When it comes to doing damage, I can just make it up as I go along, just whatever feels right in the moment. So I'm kind of happy with that. I know that there's going to be a bridge, or potential of a bridge across there, maybe there. There's going to be some areas of rubble throughout, but that's how you make damage. You smack your hard work with a rolling pin. So I've got all sorts of offcuts here and stacking them around the board, because essentially what I'm trying to do is fill in this area of river as much as possible, because the more I fill in with stuff, the less resin I'm going to have to use. So up against these bits here, these are going to get covered over by bridge pieces and whatever, and a lot of rubble. So I'm not trying to get perfect angles or anything, and all I'm going to be doing is just applying some glue and sticking it down and moving on to the next one. So I've done that around different places. I've got this big bit to have as a somewhere in the middle that can be crossed, and back here I've got all sorts of just random offcuts which I have rolled with tin foil to make a bit more rocky looking. And essentially what I'm going to be doing from here is just randomly sticking down stuff. So this big bit here, side on a good angle, I think something like that, roughly there. Seems like a good position. So yeah, just sticking down all the bits you can see where they are, and just randomly chucking other bits down as well, ready for rubble going on top of it. So just sticking bits down. So So that's the first stage of making the river a bit more full and a bit more believable as a river. And now that this is all stuck down, I'm going to dry brush all of the stuff that I've just put down, just to bring that to life a bit. It's all going to get covered in some stuff anyway, but just so there's a bit more light for what you can see, particularly the bits here and here that are going to be sticking up more and more of a part of it. Most of it is going to be underneath the resin height anyway. So here I've got various different offcuts of foam. Most of them are roughly 2 centimetres by 1 centimetre, which is the size that the building's bricks will be made out of, if I made them out of bricks, but I didn't. Some of them are much smaller, and they've all been painted with the same base colour as this. Now, they are not going to finish up this colour, but my plan is to stick loads of these down in various places to look like buildings have collapsed into the river, parts of the bridge have collapsed, etc. And then once they're in place, I'm going to dry brush it just like I did with this, but it was easier, I think, to paint these first and then dry brush them in place rather than dry brush individual bricks. That's my thinking anyway. So this is good. They're going to be rubble around kind of this area, lots of rubble around this area. That's the thinking, but having said that, there isn't going to be a lot of thinking going on. It's very much just going to be take a piece and glue it down. Now, the only important thing I need to be thinking of is that there are going to be bridge things going here, so I need to make sure I'm not going around above this height around here, because there's going to be building footprint on top of that. So that's the only thing I've really got to be thinking about. Other than that, I can just quite freely just put some glue on a thing and then chuck it down, much like I'm doing right now. This is where I've got to. It looks not great with it being that bright Aztec stone yellow, but it's not going to stay like that. Now, that's the majority of the chunky big pieces down. I'll show you how I'm going to be putting down kind of smaller pieces. Now, you can use something like PVA, but it doesn't hold as well as you'd like it to, really. So, what I've been doing is get a bunch of stones, bits of foam as they actually are, and get a clump. And let's say I want to put down some here. What I'm doing is I'm just putting a bit of hot glue down there, and then just pushing the stones, calling them stones again. They're not stones, they are bits of foam to there, and that gives it, not all of those are going to stick, but you can do a few of these, tip the whole thing upside down, and then repeat. It's better than trying to individually glue. You know, if you're trying to put hot glue on this, it's fine if you like having burnt skin. So I'm going to do, that's what I'm doing with the smaller ones. But now this stuff is down, we can give it some semblance of a dry brush. And the majority of this is going to be under resin anyway, so the colour's not really going to be that important, but I think that getting it closer to the other is a good thing to do, etc. Dry brushing is dry. You can put some glue down for flock and rubble. Lots of glue has to go down. The good thing about PVA is it does dry clear, so you can't really put too much, well, you can put too much down, but you can't really put too much down. So these areas here where I've not tried to make this look special at all, I think it's really important that plenty of rubble goes down on the joins and stuff, probably all along the edges and all around the rubble piles and basically everywhere. There's a whole bunch of glue down. Now and start adding some stuff. So this is some dark earth scatter, and I'm going to try and concentrate on the areas that I've considered to be more rocky. So there's not a lot of places, to be honest, but I might just do some in the open areas as well. Essentially not all of that is going to hit glue, so it's all roughly where I want it to be, so now it's there. I'm going to give it a shake. Alright, next up, we're going to go for the heavier stuff. So this is bits of foam which have been painted. It's flock and it's sand, so it's a kind of crumbly, rubbly mess, which you will not be surprised to find out it's going to go around the rubble. So quite a lot of this going down. Once again, most of this is not going to be hitting glue, so let's shake it up. Now it's down, I'm going to put some spray on it. This is watered down. So that's absolutely soaked. I've got some grey stone flock. I'm going to use a lot of this because it's really going to break up this this colour that's down. So I'm going to leave that in the sun to dry out, and then I'll see what I think of it. Not a million miles away from pouring resin into this, but first we need to make sure the resin doesn't fall out of the side here. So to do that, I'm going to create a dam using acetate sheet. I'll put a link for this in the description, but I'll just cut a link for this which is long enough to make sure that the dam is, the whole thing is completely covered, and then I'm going to attach it and block it all off using UV resin. So this is resin which, as you might have guessed for the name, gets set off by UV lights or UV torch. Alternatively, you can leave it in the sun, but use a torch. So I've got that nicely positioned there. So I'm going to hold it up against here like this, and then just put some along here and then get the torch on that. That sets off pretty quickly. With a little pull, you see that that's now stuck there. I'm going to build it up the sides as well, that, and across onto this side as well. And the same on the other side. So I've mixed up some resin, which I've done, added some green and brown to it to make it murky like I have on the other tiles, and a few tips for resin. So have something underneath, is just some spare cardboard. Also got an ice cream tub, can be anything, just to lift it up away from the surface, because if it does leak out of any of the dams or out underneath the side of the foam or anything, then it will drip down onto the cardboard rather than kind of drip down and stick this to the cardboard. Neither's good, it's better if it's not attached. So this isn't going to be enough to fill the whole thing, I very much doubt, but yeah, enough to get us started. So I'm just going to tip some in and see where we get to. And the ultimate goal is to pour it up to the height of our blocks here. All this is going to do is provide a starting pour. What it looks like going in, I really like the look of it in terms of it being exactly what I want it to look like. So yeah, we'll leave that and mix up some more. So our resin is set. Now to make it look more water-like, because this looks nice and still as water, but water moves around. So I've got some Viejo Diorama FX water texture, and this stuff, as you may have seen me use before, it's kind of like glue. So with this, I'm just going to be spreading it around covering the whole thing. So putting it down first of all, and then once it's down, just doing like a gentle stipple effect. And this stuff dries pretty much clear, but because of how it goes down, it starts to change how the water or resin looks. So yeah, I'm going to do this kind of thing across the entirety of the surface, and I'll show you that once it's dried. And here is that completed river tile. So you can see the top surface now not completely shiny. It is now looking more like a river, and hopefully more like moving water. So this is the second tile, and as you can see, this isn't starting from scratch, but so much of it was similar in terms of how it was made compared to the first one that I've not bothered to show you these stages. So you've got the same kind of peg things here. You've got kind of 3 bits here sticking out. You haven't got a full thing there, and that's because what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be building piers out of these wooden things. Now these are going to be 3 inches long, and they're going to be constructed using different lengths of this as well as different shapes. So you may have seen in previous videos how I make wooden planks. I want to show you how I'm going to make wooden posts. So I've got some 10mm XPS foam, and I'm going to eyeball a 10mm line here, 10mm cuboid roughly, and from here I'm going to start rolling it, which makes a slightly unpleasant noise. After a while it starts to actually roll rather than... So it goes from being a cubey rectangle type cross section to being very nearly round. And once it is very nearly round, you can take your wire brush and do what you would do with planks. I'm just going to drag this along the length and cut it into lengths. So I've made another one earlier, so I'm going to make these roughly the same. Leave one slightly longer, but yeah, that's how I'm making posts. Next up with these posts is just to paint them brown, like that, and then all of the rest of these. So let me show you how these are going to get made. So I've got some rounded off ones here, I've got some slightly thicker planks here, and some slightly thinner ones here. Now these are 3 centimetres or slightly bigger. These are 3 inches because I'm in the UK and I move between them freely, and these are 4 centimetres. And the construction is pretty simple really. So I'm going to take any 2 of these and place them this far apart. So however long this is, and I've kind of varied the length ever so slightly, but however long this is how far apart these go. Take our hot glue gun and we're going to put a bit of glue, not a lot, so that this can be glued at a height of 2, so the top of it is at about 2 centimetres. And then unsurprisingly we're going to do the same over here, and then we're going to do the same on these 2 here. So this pin is actually on the inside of it, so when it's together it's going to be like that. Place some glue across the end of here, one of these, and we're going to glue one of these. Now the construction of this is not going to be particularly strong, but this is going to be placed into the river and then the resin's going to be forming around it, so it doesn't actually need to be even slightly strong. Now from here you can have some fun putting these down in terms of the gap between the things. You can have some that are broken, just leave them as they are, just getting a plank and just sticking it down wherever feels right. These are just going to have to be trimmed down just a little bit, which I'm just going to do by ripping it. Just one final one over here, and there we have a little pier thing into our river, something like that. So I don't know the exact positioning, but something like that. So I'm going to make another 3 of them. I might create some variety and brokenness, which I'll show you once they're made. So I'm going to make one that's really broken up. So I'm going to start with, as I would normally, one of these, and I take a slightly shorter one of these, break up the end a bit with my hand, place there, and see what smaller off-cut bits I've got here. I'm going to take a few of these and just cut them at a length I'm not really thinking about, and just going to glue one edge on, kind of just let that kind of rest like that. Meanwhile, I think what I'm going to do with it is that's going to get glued having fallen down, and I think that these kind of shorter ones I've made here, maybe one there, I think I'll do a tiny bit of post there and like that. I think I'm just going to have this glued in place, so that's going to have fallen down and that's going to be glued in place, and then I'll put some posts where they would be if the thing hadn't have broken. So we've got our one that we started with, one here that's just a bit more jaggedy, one here that's got a really broken end section, and then this one here will be something like that, mostly submerged in the water. That post I'll glue into place there, and then just have a couple more posts and some wood laying around. That is the plan. And before I put the piers into place, I'm going to chuck down loads of bits of foam that have been rolled with tin foil just to fill in the space so I have to use less resin, as well as creating a more interesting kind of atmosphere underneath the water. So all I'm doing is just chucking a load of glue down and then pressing down. I know where my piers are going to be, so as long as I'm not interfering the position of them, it doesn't really matter. So the one thing I have decided is that I want this side of the thing to be more rocky and less, I felt like the other side was really filled with lots of fallen bricks and stuff. I want this side to be kind of more organic or natural looking, or whatever you want to call it. So I can get on with sticking loads of stuff down. So these bits are randomly stuck down, and that's going to dry brush it just to get some colour to the underneath, knowing full well that the majority of it is going to get covered in stuff anyway. So just like with the other piece, I've added some collapsed rubble here, not too much, just some, and none down here. I'm going to put down the pier pieces now. This is just going to be a case of hot glue on each post end. It's going pretty close to the end at this edge here, and not completely up to it, and then sticking out as hard as it sticks out. So like I said, I'm going to have one kind of broken one at each end. So I've kind of broken one here, so we'll match that up with not the broken one here. That, like I said before, it's not going to be the strongest thing in the world, but it doesn't necessarily need to be. I'm just going to break this a bit more, like that. Right, and this one be absolutely fine. I'm needing the one over here to be broken. So let's start by gluing that there. That. The majority of this is going to be held in place by the fact that there's going to be resin all around it. So post about there, we'll post just over, and then move one there like that. I'm going and ahhing about whether I'm not going to. I am going to put some more wood bits down, but I'm going to wait until I've done more flock on the bottom there. But where we're up to at the moment, not loads needed, but I am just going to dry brush these ones I've put down just to get the colour a bit closer to the other ones. And I'm just going to do a very light dry brush on the wood here just to give it a bit more definition, and just towards the top of things as well, not everywhere. Just to add something a little bit different, I've got some of this viney type stuff, and my plan here is basically just to loosely place it around mainly the pier type bits. Had some colour and something a little bit different. So not even gluing this stuff to snags on anything, so not really trying to glue it on, just literally wrapping it and snapping it. So what I might do here, see, it's grabbed onto everything even when you don't want it to. Take some grabby pliers, grabby tweezers, and pull that through from the other side, just to wrap it up a bit more. I'm trying to keep it on towards the lower part of it, because I don't particularly want it on the surface. Maybe I do. I'll probably just let it do its own thing. Something like that, do that in a few places, can't hurt. So just like on the last board, I've put downs on either end, and next up I'm going to chuck a whole load of PVA down. And now that it's covered in glue, once again it's time to cover it in flock. So this rubble type stuff is obviously going to go around here. Jiggle, put some of this dark earth on the higher areas, have a shake. And use a lot of this. Now this is a Battle Zone Urban Scatter, but if you look at it, it's just lots of different gravel sizes. I think this will be for the majority of the bottom of it. And give that a shake. And as before, we're going to give it a soak in, not Dettol, but water down glue, and then going to finish off the top with the grey rock. Okay, let's see how this resin ball goes. That's right, as I'm pouring resin. Gonna need some more. And here is the completed second tile with the piers and the water texture added now, filled up to the brim, well not quite the brim, with lovely epoxy resin, and that's how it looks across the whole board. But of course there is more. So the question you may be asking yourself is, do these actually work? Well, allow me to show you. I've got these couple of different bridges, one completely intact, one somewhat ruined, and let me show you that you can just simply slot them into place like that. And slot this one into place like that. But maybe you don't want them that way around, in which case you just pop them out and you can just switch them over, and all of a sudden you have a completely different board setup. Process. Mother!
So if you've seen my bridge video, they know how I'm going to be making these railings. I'm taking these clear drawing tacks and then I'm spraying them with a wraith bone. I made this little hedgehog thing to give as many as possible, but covering those and allowing them to dry. And once they were dry, I took my steel rule and put it parallel to the edges I wanted to put the studs on. Now on the main edges, I put them every 2 centimeters apart, and on the stairs, I put them every other centimeter. I'm not gluing them in any way, I'm just putting them, making sure they are accurately positioned and then pushing them fully in. The next stage was to make the top parts of these. I don't know what they're called, the balcony top bits. So I took some 10mm foam and I cut it into strips of about 2mm, but I didn't actually measure it, I just kind of eyeballed it. And all I did was hold these strips up to the lengths that I wanted them to be, and then cut them and maybe cut a couple of angles as well, just to make sure that they kind of fit nicely. And that was it. I had a few pieces ready for the next stage, which will be to make them look less like foam and more like the top balcony bits. So the first thing I did was roll them with tin foil, which I haven't put here, and then I've undercoated them in this kind of creamy orangey colour, which I've used as the base coat for all of the rest of the pieces on this board. Nothing complicated about the next part, just took some cheap white paint, took a dry brush and dry brushed every side of every piece so that it matched the rest of the board. Now the griminess you're seeing on the edge right now, I'll show you how to do in just a minute. In terms of attaching these top bits to the pillars, it's very, very simple. Got a glue gun on the lowest heat setting, put a little bit of glue on the top of the pillar, lining up the top part so it's nice and parallel with the edge, and then just pushing it down and holding it for a second. So I want to make this look more like it exists rather than oh, there's a brick wall. Like it look older, make it look like it's existed for a while. Yeah. I've got a black wash. This is a brown kind of shade, and it's a green kind of shade. Okay, so it's not paint, it's much thinner. Now this stuff, if you paint this on anything, it makes it feel like it's absolutely jet black instantly, which we don't really want. So put a bit in there. I'm going to water that down. This brush has previously had some grey on it, which means it's going to almost go grey, which is fine. The way up in which I do this, so I'm going to create a gradient up the side of colour so it looks like it exists. So to begin with, I'm going to brush this across. If you just put this stuff on, it does that. That's why we water it down. Probably watered it down too much and have to compensate. You can have to experiment with it a little bit. Okay, so that's fine. I need another container. This is our brown one. I'm going to water that down just because this stuff's expensive. From here, we put a brown across like that. Now where it's got all this in here, we put extra in there, because water would kind of gather more in there naturally. More kind of cracks and stuff, you get the more water ends up kind of sitting in places. Black, we've done our brown, and we can do green to have it soak in a lot, and then do that. It all ends up kind of blending together. So you can see we've got kind of 3 different layers, right? If I squeeze some of this off the brush like that, green going to the brown doesn't really matter because they get kind of mixed anyway. What I can do, go up like that and kind of try and blend it all. So it looks more like a gradient rather than just, there you go. Black, brown to green and blend. She said it looks alright. This is what it ended up looking like. I was really, really happy with how grimy and dirty and disgusting it all looks all the way around on both sides. I'm really happy with the railings as well, so much so that I've gone on to do it onto this one too. But yeah, I was so happy with the colour and grime on the brickwork that I realised I wanted to do it across not just this piece, but also across the rest of the buildings I've made, and there are a whole tub of them. So I didn't really have much option but just to get on with it. So yeah, just using the black wash to create a small section at the bottom, the Agrax Earth shade to do a little bit higher up, and then the Phonian Camera shade to do the top section, and then using a slightly wet brush just to blend between the areas so that you have a nice gradient. That's how I'm doing it on every single one that you see. If you want to do this cheaper, you could try making your own washes using paint, fairy liquid and water. It's going to get it into the kind of a milk-like consistency, and that's another way that you can do this. So after I'd done all of the painting on all of the buildings, to add the weathering and stuff like that, I've decided to put it all together, and yeah, I decided that it looked absolutely awesome. But I also realised something else. The things like this and this and this look all weathered and dirty, like they've been hit with the rain, but if we look at the floor, give you a fly over here, the floor itself just doesn't look quite right to me. So that's why I'm going to be going through the laborious task of making the floor dirty as well, and some more details. The other thing is that these posts here, whilst they look awesome in shape, they're not correct in colour and they stand out way too much, so I need to do something about that as well. So what I'm going to try with this is take some not cheap paints. So I'm using these Vallejo acrylics, get some grey on there. That's going to get a little bit too light, so add in some oil. I think something like that would be okay. Now I'm going to take a sponge. It's going to be any sponge. I'm going to get some of this paint on the sponge here. Make sure it's not completely loaded up. And to begin with, what I'm going to try and do is just sponge some paint onto these, just to try and make this a bit smaller so I can get into the gaps more easily. So a bit on there, and then hopefully I get in from most angles. I think the first ones have gone a bit too hard. It's almost like they've just been painted. I don't want them to look painted. I want them to look like they've got a bit of texture to them. So I feel like dry brushing that betters more. And I would dry brush these, but these are just completely smooth. So you can't really dry brush it if it hasn't got any texture to it at all. Well, you can, but it doesn't really get anywhere. So what do I think about that? I think, compare the sides, I definitely prefer this side, that I've done some onto that side. So I'm going to continue this across the rest of this, and I'm going to see what it looks like and then decide what I'm going to do from there. I've decided to change things up, having done a bunch of them, because whilst I like it, I think it looks a bit better. It's a bit slow, and then I'm not getting into enough detail. So this is where the power of an old brush comes in. So this is why I don't throw away all my brushes once they get a bit wrecked. So using the same paint, what I'm doing is I'm not painting it, I'm just like stippling it like that, and deliberately leaving gaps in it and getting into the detail that I couldn't get into with the sponge. Nothing particularly difficult here, just half painting something. I think they probably look a lot better, so I'm just going to do some of the outside here that I didn't get with the sponge first time around. So they end up looking like that for now, which I'm just going to say I prefer already. See what I was going to do with it. Now I have decided I want to dirty this up a bunch more. Now I could do this with some paint, mix some brown paint up and do it like that. Could do that with expensive paint, do it with cheap paint. What I decided to do is I've had some sterling mud, technical paint. It's been sat with my shelf for ages, not doing anything. It's kind of dried up a bit, but I've put a bit of speed paint medium in it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create some areas that are just a bit dirtier. So thinking about where some dirt might have gathered maybe, but also just randomly putting it in a few different places just to make it look a bit more interesting. So nothing particularly difficult about any of this, just I hope you can hear that. It's that's Jazz, who you may have seen in other videos, disagreeing with the fact that there's a new kitchen in the house. This isn't going to change the board massively in any way at all. It's just going to make it a bit more visually interesting. I think that it being kind of dirtied up is going to fit in a lot better with the sides, which are dirtied up already. So, you know, despite the fact that it's done very little at all, that's probably all I'm going to do on it. And there are a few places on the board, like this edge here, where when I've been dry brushing I had too much white paint on the brush, so it's ended up with some white scuffs on it which don't look very good. So I'm just going to go over a few of those just to make it look a bit better. Just a few areas of dirt, and I'm going to do that across the rest of the board, kind of like that. So randomly picked up this tile rather than any of the other ones, and I like how it looks. If I have the dirtiness, we've got the flock, we've got the building footprints, and it looks good. I'm happy with it, but I think that we can just take it just a little bit further, and you can see how on this building here I put some tufts and things growing out of the cracks. I think that that would actually work quite well on the tiles themselves. So I'm going to start, I've got a few different ones. So I've got these darker ones, I've got these little green ones, I've got these more yellowy ones. So I'm going to start thinking about where they might be, maybe putting some in the brown here just to kind of break them up a little bit. These aren't self-adhesive annoyingly, but you can see that maybe how a couple down here might make it look a bit better, different, quite like how that looks. So all that's going to be is a case of taking sometimes super glue. Oh, let's try super glue. Super glue is the easiest one to work with, if it does want to work.
So let's just choose that exact spot there. Spread the glue out so it's not all going in one place. And just giving that a second. Now I feel like there should be enough paint between the foam and the tuft such that it's not just going to melt the foam. So we'll leave that a minute, see what it does. If not, we'll use the other glue. Now the other glue that I will be using is super fast PVA. You could just use regular PVA. It just isn't as fast. I flew in the name. So the spout thing on this has seen better days. So anyway, just use the underside of the cap as a little vessel for the glue. Now this will definitely not dry instantly, but it can be fairly quick and neat with it like that. How's this one doing? Feels like it's beginning to get tackier. So I've kept the buildings on just so I can have an idea of, you know, what might go where. I'm thinking maybe more towards these building footprints might be a good thing rather than all being kind of out in the open. So I'm going to get on with just sticking them down. After all that, I decided I didn't like the yellow ones. They're just too bright. It didn't feel like it fit in with the rest of the theme. So I'm going to turn to my static grass applicator for some of this. Now I'm not going to be doing this in, I'm not trying to make it look like a grassy plain or anything. It's going to be in small patches. So I'm going to take some green, which is kind of fairly bright. Take a big pinch of that in there. But then I'm going to mix in this autumny yellowy brown, which puts about the same amount in, and then I'm going to shake it up and see how it looks. Too green for me at the moment, so I'm going to add a bit more of this dying browny green rather than greeny brown, if that makes any sense to anyone at all. Well, I think all we can do is try and see what it looks like. So, in an ideal world, I'd have a smaller applicator, but you know, I can't just go and buy every tool imaginable. So let's do a little test over on this bit here, because this will be one of the easiest bits to do. Take some of this stronger PVA and I put it at this towards the centre of this, and then I'm going to go out to a few different areas like that. So I want to earth this, turn it on, give it a second to build up some charge, and then I'm just going to. Right, the amount, most of that is not going to have stuck. So I'm going to give that a second for the glue to do something or other. Then we have this brush which actually came with the static grass applicator, which is designed for exactly this purpose. I'm just cleaning off the bits that are just to the side. So you're going to pick up some of these bits of flock at the same time. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to just brush this a bit, because I don't want it to look like a patch of grass that I just stuck with a static grass applicator. I want it to be a little bit more real and lived in, but in terms of the colour, I think that probably works quite well. So I might do some more just like that. Once it's stuck, or I turn it upside down and some more of that will fall off, and that's what we want. We want to have a patchy sections of grass rather than anything else. So let's try that. So let's be bold and daring. Now there's an edge here which is probably whiter than I would like it to be. So what I'm going to do is apply some grass along this edge here, maybe moving out into here, and maybe the same on this side here. Maybe loosely there's a connection between them like that. We can very easily recycle this grass that didn't glue, and we keep doing that throughout the process. Mother! Moving on! That was fun. Just like that, and we can do the same sort of thing. Overall, just instantly kind of really quite pleased with that. So more of that, but not overkill, I think is the. Obviously it's going to look slightly different with the glue dried, but yeah, that looks much more like a real lived in thing that's had some time to grow some stuff. So this sort of thing across the rest of the board, I think.
And there you have it. So I've built a stunning modular Osgiliath board from scratch, covering anything from the base to the final details. Now let's take a moment to appreciate how it looks in action with some models on the board. Just imagine the epic battles you could be creating if you had one of these of your own. Now if you're looking to expand this setup with the custom buildings that you've seen throughout this video, then I've got other videos that will walk you through creating Osgiliath style structures that will fit perfectly on this board. Check those out to bring even more detail and life to the tabletop. Remember, if you'd like to get a head start, the detailed schematics for this board are available to purchase, or they are free with the top tier of my Patreon. Your support means so much to me and helps me keep making videos like this for you. Now, if you've enjoyed this build, then there's more to come. I've got some exciting terrain projects in the works that you won't want to miss. So please like the video, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you know when those projects launch. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the ruined city of Osgiliath. I need to lie down after all of this. I'll catch you for another video soon.